Tested 1, 2, 3. Okay. Chicago at the Crossroad.
You're good at this.
Definitely, very good documentary. Very good documentary.
Thank you. It took a long time.
This is My Life in the Shot. I'm your host, Donald Washington. I want to bring you guys to Brian. He's the director of Chicago at the Crossroads. Amazing documentary. I was able to watch this documentary last night. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for this documentary. This documentary outlines Chicago. Brian, what's going on? What inspired you to make this documentary?
Donald, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all you do, because, you know, I would see you always in the streets trying to be a positive influencer and a role model for people out there. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for having me on. So I made this documentary because I wanted people across the city of Chicago, but also across the country and across the world, to understand better the circumstances involved when we talk about violence in our cities. It's not just a very clear, straight line. It's very involved. There's many layers to our violence and why it happens, including the root causes of segregation and housing policy, not just created by ourselves, you know, deciding where we want to live and who we want to live around, but also our government officials, our institutions, our structured policies that have created the systems that we see and live in to this very day.
Okay, so I did the Chicago Way documentary. One of the things I wanted to outline is the solutions to the problems in the south side of Chicago. Now, everybody's doing the violence in Chicago. What was one of the biggest factors of the violence of Chicago? And I want to play some of your documentary. I see that you went into the history. You even went back into when they tore down the project buildings and made everyone disperse. And I kind of lost you.
Don't worry, I got you. I'm not running. I'm not going to run off.
What was one of the biggest problems that because I see you was out there filming when I was out there filming. And what was some of you went straight in the heart of the worst communities to film. One thing I want to ask you, was you scared when you went into I used to see you on the craziest, the wildest blocks. What was the craziest thing you've seen or witnessed while you was on the block?
Yeah. So when we talk about shootings, which most of the time that's what we're going to film as a news chaser that some people are, but to get to the crime scenes, the shooting often just happened. So you got to remember, this is a human life that it could be laying on the ground or in a car or just gotten into an ambulance. So on his block, his or her block, with a family, and a household, friends on a street, other onlookers who are all taking this in. And people know there was a shooting on the block, you know, on a nice day usually. So it's a traumatic experience for people. And then you have these guys coming in with cameras, you have police officers coming in, you have ambulance, EMT people, and then, you know, kind of news people shooting video. And I know it's very intrusive, but it's important that you do have the news out there so people know what's going on, that it is accounted for. Not just that this person who did the shooting gets arrested, because, you know, there has to be some kind of accountability. Communities have to be held accountable for what goes on in them, but also so that it just doesn't get swept under the rug. You know, whether it's a police-involved shooting, a gang-involved shooting, possibly just a domestic situation. We also have to remember that this is a very traumatic event, so that's one individual in one household on one block, and it affects everybody. Now, multiply that by...
Okay, I see you coming in and out. Hey, Brian, you froze up. I'm going to have to call you back. Brian is the director of, I'm going to show a documentary here.
You don't want to just wake up to hearing your best friend One of the things about these guys that I found very unique is that the brotherhood and the family environment that they have, that they try to create amongst themselves. They got 1 or 2 houses that they can take all the guys in, and they kind of all chip in together, where they all kind of put their money together. They're like, we're all that we have.
Absolutely, I worry. I mean, it's a chance that they take every time they go outside. We living in a really bad environment where we just need to really change our ways.
Some kids may turn to the streets, try to hustle. But yeah, the money fast, but it's always gonna find a way to catch up with you. You don't know that your enemy right around the corner watching you from the whole situation. You don't know that the police watching too. It's always different circumstances, so keep your head up. Always just second think everything. So you gotta watch your back every day. It's the most dangerous job in America.
Does anybody ever sit down and ask them, like, what do you want to do? I'm pretty sure selling drugs is not gonna be the first thing out of their mouth. They're just getting money with that. That's not their passion. Somebody's gotta be there to say, hey, you can do this. Let me show you this over here. And then you gotta wanna do it. You gotta wanna do it.
He has a lot of potential in a job or something opposed to just selling drugs out here and just being caught up in, in this vicious, nasty world that we're living in.
We love money too much and don't know how to let it come to him instead of him gotta go and get it all the time.
Now, Brian, one thing that I do shows, and I filmed the Chicago Way documentary, and that Chicago Way documentary was also about gang violence, political corruption. But what I want to outline on my Life in the Shots YouTube channel and Facebook is the solutions to the crime and the violence that plagues the city of Chicago's minority community that you've witnessed firsthand as a great film director, and that I've witnessed firsthand as a film director. What would you say the solutions? Now, one of the things that I've noticed out there on the streets is, one, I tell people, I'm done sugarcoating it. A lot of times, my homegirl Shay stay on one of these blocks. And I was I'm finna go kick it with her. I might go kick it with her tonight. As we speak, I'm about to be on one of these blocks that we're watching right now. And one of the things that I found is that the family structure in the black community is completely broken. It's one mother, single mom that's raising kids. How did it get? And then it's also no economic opportunity, no jobs for these young men. And one of the problems, I blame my community, because we spend every dime outside of our communities and we let everybody else come in my community, set up shop. The Arabics have on the corner stores, Chinese on the Chinese food store, the stores, so we can't go anywhere to get a job. So these young kids turn into selling drugs. That's like the only opportunity for money, because once they get a felony, like you followed a young man, Edwin, and this is his lawyer right here. She's going to tell a tale on how once you catch a felony early on, you can't find a job.
Yeah. Well, a few different things there, but yeah, you hit it. You hit the nail on the head. We're talking about communities that have been systematically and intentionally marginalized. Okay, and when we talk about marginalization, we're talking about in Chicago, the Black African Americans since the 1920s. Their communities have been attacked with racial housing policies that have created the communities that you see today. From 1920s, the first wave of the Great Northern Migration, you saw the development of the Black Belt and the slums on the South Side. Now, as housing opened up and you saw white flight, you also saw the rise of high-rise public housing, and eventually you saw demanufacturing, when the manufacturing jobs left. And those were many of the jobs that African Americans came from the South to the North for. So when that happened, these racist segregation tactics around housing really began to expose the holes in the system, where we now have a lack of services, especially after public housing was torn down. We have a lack of resources, a lack of jobs, a lack of grocery stores. Education. So when we talk about solutions now, we have to be just as intentional as they were when they created these communities. Because when people ask me why I spend so much time on this documentary, why I care, why a white person like myself would decide to go in and do something like this, well, because great, I've heard it before. Oh, great, another white guy trying to tell the story of Black America. And my answer is, one, these communities were not created by themselves. They will not be changed by themselves. Two, as a citizen of your city, you have to take some type of pride and responsibility in your city and be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and not engage in benign neglect, which is ignoring something, expecting it to change. And that goes for all the people in Chicago should have that attitude, as well as our political leaders, our institutions, not just the ones in Inglewood and in Garfield Park, but the ones on the North Shore in downtown as well. And the solutions are going to have to be sustainable, okay? And it's going to take investment from not just the government, the city, but for private corporations who are going to have to invest dollars into the neighborhoods, because at the end of the day, you're making money off the city of Chicago. You got to put something back in.
Okay, so I see so many celebrities like Michael Jordan giving to the coronavirus, Oprah Winfrey giving to the coronavirus. My thing is, they should be putting businesses to make that money multiply to give these young brothers and sisters jobs in the community. Just like the young brother you follow, Edwin, just like my community. Let me tell you what's happening. We don't own none of the businesses in my community. So the Arabs own the Arabics own the grocery store. Well, it's not a grocery store, but the corner store.
Yeah.
And they won't hire us. They won't hire from the community they serve. The Chinese food store, they would never ever hire from the community they serve. And that's why I tell people we have to start our own businesses, but it's so hard. Also, Brian, one thing that you may not notice, in my community, I don't know if you live in the black community or if you live up north or wherever you live at. I stay in the black community, and I want to tell you one thing that a lot of people don't understand. Banks buy up a lot of properties, and they sit on them, and they don't sell them. They let them rot. And so now there's 2 rotten houses on my block. I just bought this house 3 years ago. There's a rotten house on my block. Then there's another rotten house on my block. So now my property value just dropped. So now, if I want to sell my house, I can only sell it for half of what I bought it. So now my only option is to Section 8 it. And there goes the neighborhood. I went to the auction. When I go to the auction, I went to go buy a couple houses for very dirt cheap, right? These companies bought all the community houses. They own over 200 houses, and guess what they're doing? They're leaving them empty so that the property value goes down, the schools will be taken, and there goes the neighborhood. The only thing I can do now, if I want to get out of here, is to Section 8 it. And the whole South Side is going to be like, oh, snap, it's a cheap house, or I can get this Section 8 house.
Yeah. Well, remind people they can go watch the documentary right now at Chicago at the Crossroad.com. You should probably maybe put that in the description that people can go watch this right now. And I live out south. I live out south, so I know what you're talking about. And the vacant lots are a big problem. Mayor Lightfoot, with her program Invest Southwest, which is attempting to invest $150 million into 10 underserved, historically disinvested in communities on the southwest side of Chicago. This is the first time that I think there has really been a worthwhile effort for a mayor of the city of Chicago to start seriously looking at investing in these communities. And there may be some people out there who say, well, no, the mayors have, but if you look at downtown, so if that's where the money is going to go, there's no surprise that nothing has gotten done. A lot of these communities have been sitting from who live there are staying to reap the benefits of the new grocery stores and so on and so forth in Bronzeville or in Hyde Park. We're seeing an outward migration, not just a loss of the population in the city of Chicago of the Black community. We've lost hundreds of thousands of individuals since 1990, and those are people who were the mentors and business owners, and leaving the city of Chicago for numerous reasons. But we have to start turning that around in our
communities that the government is not going to come for you. You're going to have to help yourselves. One thing I tell people is group economics. Spend your money in your community that hires from your community. Therefore, the young guy down the street can have a job at the corner store, can have a job at this thriving business down the street. Because if you don't shop at businesses now, a lot of people say in a lot of these impoverished communities, there's only like one store. If you've seen it, 3 or 4 stores, and none of them are black owned or brown owned or from that community. And they don't hire from that community. So therefore, the young man that you see down the street, that I see down the street, they can't go down the street and get a job. They can't go down the street and get a job. So the only hustle they got is to sell weed, sell dope, and to stand on the block. That's the waiting on a political solution.
And their philosophy is to reset their mindsets and nurture them. And, Pastor Phil Jackson, who runs that program and has for the last 30 years, his philosophy is we'll love you until you can love yourself. So you have to have people willing to invest in these young men, because in many ways they hold a lot of mistrust, whether it's towards the educational, take the time. There need to be more organizations, because those community-based institutions are the top.
All right, so
there are a lot of good ones across the city.
You know what? And so one of the things in the Chicago Way documentary, the documentary that I wrote, that I'm gonna definitely send you a link. And this problem started in 1965, and one of the things that I blame and I prove in this documentary that welfare, a lot of people think that welfare is one of the best things that could happen. It's the worst thing, in my opinion, that could happen to impoverished communities, and I'll tell you why. The reason why it rewards horrible behavior, this is why the broken home is so prevalent in the black community. In these communities, you will see 90% boys are lost without behavior. Here's the right way to go. I ain't even gonna sugarcoat it. I'm tired of sugarcoating. Every drug dealer, every killer, every juvenile detention, every inmate shares one common denominator, and that is they're from a single family home. And that's why I talk about the introduction to welfare in the black community in 1965, because black community had 91% two-family households, no crime. In 1965 to 1973, that number doubled. It was like 53% single-family households. By the 1990s, go ahead.
Yeah. 2 things on that, since we're just talking. This is just a historical point of view. One thing is that once public housing came around, they would have welfare workers come around and make sure the father was not in the household. And the reason why the father wasn't in the household, he actually could be there, but the family would not receive the benefits. Now, if you give anybody that option, that look, you have to hide, you can't really be here, you got to come and go, and we're going to get basically free rent. Most people, that seems like a pretty good deal, right? So you entice that with people, and they're going to do it. But the question is, why was that an incentive? Why was that something to incentivize people to be on Section 8? It really ruined, like you said, it really ruined a lot of households, a lot of families, especially in cities like Chicago, and where the male figure then felt marginalized. in those buildings, in those communities. But yeah, go ahead.
So that's one of the things that I outlined. One of the things I wanted to outline is, okay, when did this start and how did this start? And one thing that I've noticed is that once you reward horrible behavior, now in 2020, there's no incentives on making a good decision. So that's why I interviewed several Africans from Nigeria. And one of the things I interviewed them and I asked them from the outside looking in, what is the problem with African Americans in the African American community? And one of the things he told me, he said, Donald, there's no family structure in the African American community. He said if a woman wants to go out and sleep with a loser that has 10 kids, no crib, car, career, in and out of documentary. Now he said in your documentary, but a statistical.
Yeah. And the welfare topic is definitely a slippery slope. And when we do talk about welfare, we have to also acknowledge, the white people in Arkansas, in Kansas, in rural America, who are also reaping the rewards of welfare. So I think a lot of times we may get pigeonholed into thinking or discussing the welfare topic in that it's a Black African American issue. However, white America has the same exact thing when it.
All right, I think he froze up. I'm losing a lot of frames. All right, so Brian is the director of Chicago at the Crossroads. It's up. The documentary is amazing. I just watched it. Very good documentary. He goes into the city of Chicago and he interviews and just outlines what's going on, the violence in the Black community. I want to show you guys a little bit of it here.
It's going back. Got a afro right there.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
A doctor, a police.
Oh, so she's gonna have two jobs. She's gonna be a police officer and a doctor, huh?
Yep.
You're gonna be making people feel good and taking the crime off the streets at the same time.
I was discussing with Brian is that 90% of these children will be fatherless. And I did, on my documentary, I talked about welfare and how the introduction of rewarding horrible behavior. A lot of people hate me for it. A lot of people disagree, but that's cool. You could disagree. That's your opinion. However, before welfare, we had 91% two-parent households. Everybody that come from two-parent households, those are our college graduates, stuff like that. The jail system, they all share the exact same common denominator. 90% of them come from a single-parent household. Suicide, high school dropouts. That's plaguing our city. If we're going to go into the problems in the city of Chicago, I ain't no reason to sugarcoat it. I'm done doing that. I'm done sugarcoating the issue. I'm going to call them back, but I'm going to wrap this up. Hold on, let me get Brian back on. I'm going to try to get him back on. For those guys, for you guys that are watching, in the comment section, say what do you think is the biggest issue in the Black community, especially urban communities like Chicago. What do you guys think is the underlying? But my thing is this. All right, we get what the problem is. What is the solution? What is the solution to those problems? All right, Brian, should be coming on. What are the solutions to those problems?
Oh, that's okay.
Now, Brian,
hey, I lost you, man. I'm sorry.
All right, so Brian, one thing I was just talking about is now that we talked about the problems in the poor communities in Chicago that stems a lot of this violence and destruction, what would you say is the solution to the problem? Because we can talk about the problem all day and night, and that's all I hear. When I turn on the TV, I hear problem. But
investment into, and when we talk about solutional average, like New York and LA did, And I know the problems in Chicago are very by investing into the communities that need it the most. And that investment comes in the form of both public, private dollars. It has to get to the community, and it has to get to the organizations that are going to best put it to use. And that is the community-based institutions that are going to offer a few things. One is counseling. You have to start getting these guys re-centered, reset from the life that they're used to on the street, and that comes from a mentor. Two, there may be drug addiction counseling involved. Three, you have to get some kind of trade, whether it's culinary, whether it's in the arts, whether it's in the hotelier field. You have to get them some kind of trade, and that's how you can kind of start to rebuild somebody's life where they're not in the streets. Okay. Somebody who has a job and they're working 40 hours a week, they are not going to want to go hang out on the block on the corner when they get home. The second thing is you're going to have at some point the vacant lots that you talked about and the empty dwellings, the buildings, those are going to have to be developed. And Mayor Lightfoot is incentive centers, but you have to also bring businesses in, not just a Starbucks on every corner, but businesses that are sustainable and that will provide jobs and some type of self-esteem for people in the communities when they have great businesses running and operating like they used to be on 63rd and Halstead. Go back and look at pictures. So then you really change some things.
So Brian, I want to ask you straight up: do you 15%, not even 15% of the murders in Chicago have been solved? Do you think the police give a shit?
Now you're talking about 15% of the murders, and that's better than what it used to be. Now we were at one point in time we were clearing 3% of the shootings. Only 3%. So guys weren't scared that if they did go out and attempt to take somebody's life, and we call these shootings, it's attempted murder. The police have to be held accountable for their actions as well. So in the past years, we have mistrust between the communities and the police. And now, Donald, I'm sorry, I don't want to get out of their cars because we aren't supposed to do, or just community backlash in general. But now we have coronavirus. We will probably see an increased, a heightened disassociation and disconnection between the police and the people in the communities, leading to an even lower level of clearance rates of both murders and shootings. There's violence on the streets.
Literally everywhere. Look like you motherfucker. And I used to be like, damn, this is who y'all got to protect and serve y'all. This motherfucking cop looked at me. That motherfucker just and
I mean, with some, there's real animosity between the police and the community. And Donald, that's been built up for years. That's something that's been built up for decades. And issue, but in Chicago, as we've seen every couple months, with the new one, I'm sorry, Donald, in Alabama, where the young man was shot down in the street and it wasn't reported for 10 weeks. So that problem.
Let me tell you something. The entire Chicago police force should be all fired and rehiring. Now, Inglewood, people should come from Inglewood. Why? Because I know you genuinely care and want to see betterment of the city of Inglewood.
Well, that's the other thing, Donald. With this documentary, we would like to see this being integrated into educational settings, and not just schools, but we think that as public servants, police officers, firemen, social workers, hospital workers. We feel like in order to best serve your communities, you have to understand the people you serve. So with Chicago communities, how they were created, and we feel like if officers and other people who work in the communities watch it, then they'll at least understand where the communities came from in order to better serve them today.
Absolutely. I honestly, I don't buy that you just can't solve a goddamn murder. They all expose, but I just keep you not.
Well, Donald, now we're talking about now we're also talking about accountability of each other.
That too.
We have to. The communities have to be willing to make that call when they have information, and that's another problem. If nobody will talk, it's pretty hard to solve a murder at the same time. Not that they're trying that hard to solve a lot of these murders.
I honestly think that like far as the protest after the Ferguson, as they call it, the Ferguson effect, I believe they're saying, hey, you guys are protesting us, F you, y'all deal with it, I'm gonna step back, y'all motherfuckers have at it, just kill each other, we gonna step back. I think that's what they're doing. If you can't solve 11% of the murders, stop it.
There was a lot of, I interviewed a lot of people for this film. I interviewed maybe 100 people. And some folks actually thought that for a while after the public housing was torn down, that the intent and the strategy from the Chicago Police Department was to let the gangs kill each other off. And so when you said that, you're not the first time I've heard that. I actually heard that quite a bit.
Now, it's Chicago. Now, I wonder, one thing that I've noticed in Chicago, a lot of people from other get killed. That shit.
Yeah, meaner. I wouldn't advise anybody to go down. There's having connections to people in the community. Whether they're guys in the streets, from the gang members, the runners, police officers, all of that. We shot on the west side a lot. So all this stuff is on the west side. The west side is such a different beast than the south side. And it's grittier. It's outside. People are more outside on the blocks. Mm-hmm. So this is like Avers. I probably shouldn't say the street. This is over by Independence.
Yeah, this ain't for everybody, man. You just can't go out there and pull out a camera and start filming people.
No.
You don't do it. It's
very. I don't recommend it for anybody, and I don't recommend anybody to make documentaries. Do something that makes money.
I know. Right?
we spend so much time. I mean, I filmed this. That's my guy Jovan. He introduced me to the streets. He is the first guy who I filmed with, but I've known him for a long time. Mm-hmm. So that's over in West Garfield Park. West Garfield Park is no joke. Anything I'm playing?
And you know what? I know you asked the young brother Edwin, hey,
favors for these guys. I'd hit them with a little cash or not a lot, but whatever I could, and then maybe make some music videos for them. That was key. Or worse, punk bitch and go back and make them look bad and twist their words and edit it in a certain way to fit your narrative. As a filmmaker, you have to hold your integrity intact and make sure that you're looking out for them too. You don't want to show them doing illegal stuff. You don't want to show them with guns. You don't want to show them selling drugs. So you got to look out, and it's a two-way street. But I'm appreciative to all the people out there who let the people tell their story, and I'm just kind of a conduit to get it out for them. I love filmmaking. I love shooting. I love the story of the human condition. And at the end of the day, I hope what we do makes a difference, that we can open up some eyes, we can open up some hearts, and then tell a good story with good intentions that can...
On the show, I love the documentary, man. It was very well filmed, man. The production was amazing, man. The story is amazing. Of course, this is something I've been following for years and years and years. And, you know, all of my family and friends are still living it.
Thank you, Donald. I appreciate everything you do. You stay safe out there. You know, we'll just have to just everybody take it day by day, and I'll see you again, brother.
Absolutely. I want everybody watching this, go to chicagoatthecrossroad.com. The video is up. I'm going to put a link to it in the description box. This documentary is amazing. chicagoatthecrossroad.com. Go watch the film. Is there anything else you want to say, Brian?
Thank you for what all you do.
Absolutely.
You do a good, you do a lot of good things with your heart in it. So you keep doing what you're doing, and let's link up soon.
Absolutely. Make sure you guys like, subscribe. Let me know what you think about this video. Peace.
All right, thanks for